Subaru CVT transmissions. Love them or hate them. Service or not to service. So in my Q&A video from a week or so ago, I had a question regarding the CVT transmission and when to service it. And I gave the answer of 120,000 miles because that's what the dealership that one of the dealerships I go to, and I know quite a few people there, that's what they were saying was what you're supposed to go by. I've had people in the comments on that video say, my dealership said it's a lifetime unit, don't touch it. It's supposed to be changed every 30,000 miles. If you're under severe duty, you're supposed to change it every 28,955 miles, or some oddball, weird number. I don't know how they arrived at. So what's the deal? So yesterday, I took it upon myself to call Subaru of America and directly ask them what Subaru's official stance is on the CVT transmission, servicing it, and what is the recommended intervals, if any. And when I called Subaru America, I outlined, what I was trying to find. They said, well, check your owner's manual. I'm like, the owner's manual doesn't say anything about servicing it or any of the mileage. So they put me on hold. They checked around, talked. I was on hold for quite a few, 15 minutes or so. But the representative came back, had the information. And from Subaru of America, quote unquote official, Subaru classifies their CVT transmission as a lifetime sealed unit. It is not to be opened. Fluid is not to be replaced. Now, let's unpackage that a little bit. In the owner's manual, it does say that if you are under severe operating conditions, lots of mountainous driving, hills, stop and go, city traffic, muddy conditions, off-roading, towing, or racing, that it should be serviced. And I believe it gives a figure of like 28,955 miles or some oddball weird number that I don't know how they arrived at. So what should we do? Who should we listen to? Well, in talking with Subaru, the CVTs have a warranty on them above the powertrain. This may be different and it only affects certain model years. But most of the CVTs have a 100,000 mile warranty on them, whereas the powertrain regular warranty 60,000 miles. Subaru on certain year models issued an extended warranty for the CVT unit. If you have serviced your CVT transmission, changed the fluid or anything, done anything to open that sealed factory unit before the 100,000 miles, you have voided your warranty and Subaru will not warranty your transmission. Subaru has been very specific about their CVT units. If in the dealership setting you have someone that has a CVT issue or failure, their option is to replace it with a reman or new unit from Subaru. At that point, the old unit is put in the crate that the new one came in. It is sent back to Subaru and is to be not molested, not torn down in any way, just removed, put in the crate, and sent to Subaru. They will take it and do an analysis on what the failure was. They use this as a learning tool to help them improve the design of the CVT transmission. So it's a kind of little bit of a weird situation. They're kind of using the vehicle that you spent your hard-earned money on as a learning tool for them. Yes, they've done extensive testing and engineering on these transmissions. They tested, I'm sure, in laboratories and on racetracks and extended endurance and things of that nature before they put it into a production car for you to purchase. But yes, they are using your transmissions as a learning tool still to do failure analysis. So with that said, that's why Subaru doesn't want you to open the unit. They don't want you to service it. They don't want you to change the transmission fluid, anything to it. They want it sealed from the factory. If it fails, they want it to be completely how it left the factory, and then that way they can analyze what failure happened and how they're going to correct it in next designs. Another sign that this CVT transmission is not to be serviced and Subaru doesn't want you to service it is the filter location. The filter for the CVT transmission is actually built in between two halves of the transmission case. To replace your transmission filter on a CVT transmission for a Subaru, you have to physically remove and tear down the transmission. So in that regard, the filter is rated as lifetime as well as the fluid. Another reason why Subaru doesn't want you to replace the transmission fluid in your CVT transmission is the CVT is extremely susceptible to contamination. Any small particles, contaminated fluid, anything like that that could possibly get into the transmission when doing a drain and refill is a big no-no. They don't want anything getting in there. They want it to be a very clean environment. That said, there are times that Subaru wants you to replace the CVT transmission fluid. Well, not you, but the Subaru dealerships. If internal transmission work is required, if the transmission pan needs to be dropped, say a solenoid needs to be worked on, replaced, the torque converter, anything like that that requires removal of the fluid to access internal components, that wouldn't be a full transmission replacement. At that point, then you put new Subaru CVT transmission fluid in. It's not a maintenance kind of replacement. It's just if you have to drain the fluid that's in it for any kind of repair, put new fluid in, don't reuse the old fluid. Another thing is they're kind of susceptible to if you have them over or underfilled, and they're pretty tricky to fill at home. It's, I don't have the process in my head right now. I'm going by memory. Might put it up here on the screen. But if I recall correctly, the car has to be level on all four tires. So either on a 4-post lift or a 2-post lift leveled out. The transmission fluid has to be to operating temperature. You have to have a special Subaru tool to put the fluid in because there's no traditional dipstick. It goes in through the side of the case. I know it's a special tool. You could just use a transfer pump like using, like we used to put the gear oil in the rear differential in the Subaru, but it's a special tool for Subaru. So, you know, it's not quite a DIY friendly service. There are many videos out there of people doing it. I mean, it can be done DIY, but Subaru is very specific on who and how and why the fluid is replaced. Another difference is that the fluid in a CVT transmission and the fluid in a conventional automatic transmission do not do the same thing. In the traditional 4 and 5 EAT transmission, your transmission fluid is a hydraulic fluid used for applying your clutches, your clutch packs, the bands, and due to just regular use, the friction material on the clutches wears and comes off of the clutch and gets into the transmission fluid. The transmission case and the valve body and most of the components are made of aluminum, and aluminum is pretty soft. So as the fluid circulates through your transmission, it's picking up all these contaminants. They're not always removed by the filter because some of them are very small. And your fluid becomes basically a liquid sandpaper, and as the fluid goes through the transmission at high pressure, it will wear the bores, all the small little intricate passages in your valve body and transmission, and it will expand them due to the friction. And as the transmission, as you continue to drive with that old fluid in there, more and more contamination builds up. It'll open up these passages more. You will lose pressure in your transmission. It will damage seals and also lose pressure again. And if anyone knows how automatic transmissions work, basically fluid pressure is how the thing works. And if you lose your fluid pressure, then you lose your transmission. So to prevent that, every 36,000 miles, you replace your transmission fluid. That way the transmission fluid does not gather up a large amount of the particulates and stays clean, and it doesn't go through and erode the interior of the transmission and cause all these issues. Whereas in the CVT transmission, you have two pulleys. For most of you that know how CVT transmissions work, there's two pulleys that change shape essentially, well, change diameter, and there's a steel belt that runs between these two pulleys. You run the CVT fluid from the oil pump, which your standard transmission has an oil pump too to pressurize your transmission fluid. And the solenoids are used to regulate the amount of pressurized CVT fluid that goes to these pulleys. And depending on the amount of fluid that's added or removed, they will open and close, and it will basically change the size of the pulley from small to large. And one's input, one's output. And varying these sizes is what gives you your constant velocity from the CV and the CVT transmission, where you're constantly moving the gear ratio, sizes of these pulleys, and the way the belt spins. So the transmission fluid under normal operation, there's not as much particulates getting into the fluid that are causing erosion and damage. And you know, Subaru's engineers have gone through the testing and they say that, you know, it's not required. But then there's the monkey wrench of, well, if you're towing or doing all these other things, which, you know, most people kind of do fall into the severe duty list of, you know, driving in muddy conditions, off-road, hills, city, stop and go, mountainous terrain, towing or racing, that you should change it more frequently. In the older Subarus and the service manuals and in the owner's manual, you know, it was every 36,000 miles, replace your transmission fluid, and you're good to go. And the new CVT, it's, well, we don't talk about it. Just don't touch it. So, does fluid degrade with time and temperature and wear? Yes, fluid does. There's no such thing as a lifetime fluid in any vehicle. This fluid will get contaminated and break down with age. Subaru has formulated it where it will be less susceptible to this stuff, but you know, 200,000-300,000 miles, if they make it that long, they're gonna be pretty grungy in there, I bet you. So what are we to do? My advice on the issue, after talking, like I said, hearing your comments, talking to other guys that work at other dealerships, and after calling Subaru America, if I bought a new CVT transmission equipped Subaru right now, what I would do is I would drive it till the 100,000 mile mark, would not touch the CVT at all. When we got to about 120,000 miles, like the other guy at the dealership I talked to, they informed me that, you know, 120 was probably the go-to number. I probably would change it at 120,000 miles and not touch it again for another 120,000 miles. If you're doing extensive towing, extensive, you know, mountain stuff, mountainous driving, things like that, that are under the severe category, I still probably wouldn't touch it until you reach 100,000 miles. You don't want to void your warranty. You know, if it fails in that time, let Subaru give you a new transmission. Past that, I probably would change it every 50,000 miles or so. I'm pulling that number out of the air. If you want to go 30, that's your choice. You know, I'm not going to tell you not to do something. I mean, in theory, should changing your fluid more often be detrimental? No. New fluid is new fluid. So if it was good enough when it went in at the factory, it should be good enough to replace it at 30,000 miles, 20,000 miles, 5,000 miles, whatever you want to change it. You know, it shouldn't be an issue, but what Subaru's saying the issue is with changing it and opening the transmission is getting it to seal up good, and contamination in the transmission. That's what they're most worried about, is contaminating the transmission. So yeah, if it was me personally, my vehicle, I would go to 100,000 miles, replace it at 120, and replace it at 120,000 mile intervals. If I was towing or doing off-roading, etc., probably 30 to 50,000 miles after the 100,000 mile warranty period. But it would be really nice if Subaru could come out and outline, you know, something concrete for the owners, for the dealerships, you know, something that they could have as a blanket statement, because as you commented on the last video, well, my dealership told me it's lifetime, never touch it. My dealership said 100,000 miles, mine said 120,000 miles, mine said 30,000 miles. They need to get together and figure out what they want to do. They need to get together and figure out what their customers need to know. You know, they need to be on top of this. People need the answers. And it seems a little bit odd that Subaru is having trouble giving people the answers on the CVT transmission that they need. So I would really like to see Subaru come out and give a definitive maintenance schedule for the CVT transmission. I know that they're in the early stages of the transmission. It's only been out since 2010, 2011. So right at 10 years. We're just not counting the old CVT that was in the Justy, if I remember correctly. Like I said, I'll put it somewhere. I know they had one. But yeah, they need to figure it out quickly. They need some kind of guideline for their customers and for their dealerships and their service departments, you know, to tell people, keep their customers informed, because customers want to know. Subaru people are a little bit different than everybody else. Most Subaru owners are pretty vigilant about the maintenance on their car, and that's why most Subarus last 200, 300 plus thousand miles, because of their owners. You know, most of these other car manufacturers that crap out because their customers get in the car and they put gas in it and they change the oil, you know, whenever, and that's about it. And they fix something when it breaks. They just run them into the ground. As I've seen, you know, just my personal experience, most Subaru owners are pretty responsible and stay on top of their maintenance and, you know, keep their car serviced, which is essential for longevity. So rambling a bit on here now. Hopefully I can edit this down. I've been talking about 22 minutes now. So yeah, Subaru CVT transmission. Subaru of America told me directly through their hotline that, you know, it's a lifetime unit, don't touch it unless you're doing all this towing and everything else, and then you should touch it, but we don't know when to touch it. So get it together, guys. We need your customers need a definitive answer on servicing their transmission. So any comments, questions, things you've heard, what you do with your transmission, you know, comment below. Let's get some discussion going on it in the comment section, and figure out what you guys are doing with your personal vehicles. So with that said, thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time.